What's going on, guys? B. Scott here with you, and on today's show, we got your waiver wire heading in to week number 13. Obviously, there's one more game left. We got Seattle playing the Washington football team tonight, but I'm going to give you the early waiver wire, some players that are injured, and some key players that really had good days. So lots of players to talk about this week on the waiver wire. So keep it locked and loaded right here at the first 4 downs. What's going on, guys, and welcome back. As I mentioned in the preview, we're going through your waiver wire heading in to week number 13. We're getting that much closer to that playoff push, so it's time to bolster your teams. And we got some outlook on some players that are injured and key players that just have some good matchups. So before we get to today's content, don't forget, like the video, subscribe, share, thumb bell, and then comment. There's a player I don't mention because I don't mention every single player. Drop in the comment section. I'll be glad to give you my opinions on whether to roster him, whether to pick him up, trade him, whatever situation you're in. Drop any questions in the comment section. I'll be glad to give you my opinion. So let's start at the top. I like to roll through every position and give a few players at each one. So the quarterback position, we'll start there. First off, I got Carson Wentz. He's owned in 58% of leagues, so he is a little bit over that 50% threshold. 306 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions this week against Tampa Bay defense. It's really started to pick it up, but Carson Wentz has played well on the season. 21 touchdowns to 5 interceptions total, and he's got the Houston Texans next week. We know T.Y. Hilton likes to burn the Houston Texans just career-wise, and it's a good spot for Carson Wentz if you need a stream option heading into Week 13. So Carson Wentz is a good ad for me, a good waiver wire guy, and a guy that could potentially be streamed. Another guy, Taylor Heineke at the quarterback position, a guy that has played well over the last few weeks. Now, we don't know he's got to play tonight against the Seattle Seahawks, but they got the Las Vegas Raiders coming up on the road. Las Vegas, they've been roasted 2 of the last 3 weeks. 7th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. 20 touchdowns allowed to just 4 interceptions. That Raiders defense just hasn't played well. And like I mentioned, Mahomes, week 10, 400 yards, 5 touchdowns. Just this week, Thanksgiving Day, Dak Prescott, 375, 2 touchdowns with no wide receivers. So I like Taylor Heineke as a potential good stream option next week, a guy that could be rosterable. Let's look at some running backs. Obviously, the first running back I'm going to mention, I had Alexander Mattison as the first, but now I got to change it. Chuba Hubbard. Obviously, the news just broke that Christian McCaffrey is going to miss the remainder of the season. So what does that mean? That means Chuba Hubbard, 1, is an automatic, in my opinion, plug-and-play RB2. Now, he's not necessarily a RB1. He does hold some RB1 upside based on volume, and he could get there on good weeks, but he's a guaranteed surefire RB2 that you're going to pick up for the rest of the season. You can set it and forget it in your lineup. So must be rostered. 37% rostered right now. And he's got the Atlanta Falcons after the bye week this week, so just a great spot for Chuba Hubbard to be a potential low-end RB1, high-end RB2 that week. And going forward, like I mentioned, solid RB2. So Chuba Hubbard should be your number 1 waiver. Anybody looking for a running back, this is going to help you, so especially down that stretch. And then we got Alexander Mattison, owning 50% of leagues. Dalvin Cook, left with a shoulder injury. Now, this is kind of a speculative ad considering Dalvin Cook seems to always have shoulder injuries and kind of play through them. He looked like he was in a lot of pain, kind of grabbing at his shoulder, grabbing at his pec. So you'll have to wait and see how that injury shakes up. And if for some foreseeable reason he were to be done for the season or be placed on IR, Alexander Mattison would be a potential RB1. So he's got to be rostered. They're at the Detroit Lions. The next matchup should be a smash spot. And if they were going to rest Dalvin Cook in any matchup, it would be that one. So Alexander Mattison, my running back, 2 running backs that really are going to be very heavily waivered this week and should be for good reason. A couple other running backs that I like, lower end guys. Obviously, Dontrell Hilliard, 29% owned, and he's going into a bye, so maybe you don't pick him up necessarily. But he finished with 12 carries, 131 yards and a touchdown, had a 70-yard touchdown run. Really great moves. He's got Jacksonville after the bye, which is a good spot. And Dontrell Hilliard at this point has some fresh legs in the end of the season on a team that likes to run the football, so he's a good ad. And also Deontay Foreman also finished with over 100 yards. So both these guys, we know A.J. Brown's going to be out of the lineup. We know Julio Jones is going to be out. So Dontrell Hilliard is a good option, potentially with, like I mentioned, he does have the receiving upside like last week, but I told you I didn't see how he could get 10 targets again, and he wasn't targeted, I want to say once or twice just this week, but still a speculative ad, especially after this bye week. They got the Jacksonville Jaguars. So another guy, Jamal Williams, owning 39% of leagues, 15 carries for 65 yards. DeAndre Swift, left with the shoulder injury. If he were to miss some time, DeAndre Swift was averaging, I want to say, 20-plus touches per game. So you talk Jamal Williams at least right around that 20-touch threshold and a potential RB2 at least low end honestly, if Swift were to miss. So he's a guy, once again, another speculative ad that I'd be picking up and wavering. And now I got a couple guys, Boston Scott, Miles Sanders dealing with an ankle injury. We'll see how severe that one is. And they're at the New York Jets. That's the best spot you could possibly have to be a running back. And the Philadelphia Eagles have really started to lean on their run game heavily, and they should do it next week against the Jets. I think Boston Scott could be a potential RB2, solid RB2 next week. I mean, if Miles Sanders were to miss. So Boston Scott, 15 carries, 64 yards, found the end zone once again against the Giants. That's all he does is score touchdowns against the Giants. I like him as a good ad and a good streaming option against the Jets for sure. And then Matt Breida, I'm going to mention him. Tough matchup, but they face the New England Patriots, who just gave up 200 yards on the ground to the Tennessee Titans. Zach Moss, healthy scratch, like I mentioned last week. If Moss were to miss and be a healthy scratch, then maybe you could find a potential spot for Breida. 9 carries, 26 yards, 2 catches, 29 yards, and a touchdown against the New Orleans Saints. So Matt Breida, potential low-end flex option this week. Once again, if Zach Moss were to be a healthy scratch, I would like him in the matchup against the New England Patriots. They're not going to be able to stop the Buffalo Bills altogether. So I think Breida could have a decent day here. And if he finds the end zone, that's where you're going to get that touchdown-dependent RB2. So Matt Breida, another option at the running back position. Lots of running backs to talk about this week on the waivers. So let's get to some wide receivers. Not a ton here. A few guys that I like. Obviously, Van Jefferson, owned in 49% of leagues, 9 targets, 3 catches, 93 yards, and a touchdown. The big 79-yard touchdown against the Green Bay Packers. He's had 6+ targets in his last 5 games. Now, yes, Odell Beckham, 10 targets yesterday. That worries me about Van Jefferson's outlook going forward a little bit, but he still saw 9 targets. The Los Angeles Rams defense, it really hasn't played up to par, especially against good football teams. And then they got the Jacksonville Jaguars coming up. That's a pretty good matchup here. So Van Jefferson, I'd probably be rolling him out there. Just a good RB or a good wide receiver 2-3 type spot for the rest of the season, in my opinion, for Van Jefferson's outlook. So a guy that should be rostered in more than 50% of leagues. Another guy, T.Y. Hilton. This is more of just a stream type option. He tends to roast the Houston Texans by a wide margin, and that's who they play. Coming off a game, he had 5 targets, 4 catches, 28 yards, and a touchdown. I like him as a potential stream option, a good flex type option this week. So T.Y. Hilton is a guy. And then I'm going to mention Deshaun Jackson. Now, look, he's going to be boom or bust the rest of the season, I really think. 4 targets, that's it. 3 catches, 102 yards, and the big touchdown. But they got the Washington football team. That secondary is not good. They got the Kansas City Chiefs, who've been playing better as of late, but still not a great secondary in my opinion. And then we got at the Cleveland Browns, which their secondary's honestly giving up a lot of big plays too. So Deshaun Jackson is a good boom-bust type flex option down the stretch here on your way to the playoffs. If you got to take chances and you need that big boom, he's a guy on a weekly basis that could potentially get there. So now let's talk about some tight ends that I love picking up this week. One, Foster Moreau. Now this comes with the Darren Waller injury, obviously, and we have to wait and see if Darren Waller is going to be healthy enough to give it a go. But if he doesn't, the one game in which Foster Moreau started without Darren Waller, 6 targets, 6 catches, 60 yards, and a touchdown in that game. They got good matchups down the stretch, like I mentioned, just with Deshaun Jackson, Washington football team, at the Kansas City Chiefs, and at the Cleveland Browns. Those are good spots. So he's a good speculative tight end pickup ad, depending on whether, obviously, Darren Waller's going to play or not. And then another guy is James O'Shaughnessy. He's on the Jacksonville Jaguars in week 1. He saw 8 targets, 6 catches for 48 yards. Then he gets hurt the following week. Now he's back from IR, 5 targets, 3 catches for 29 yards, gets the 2-point conversion, and Dan Arnold placed on IR and more than likely going to miss the rest of the season. So I like O'Shaughnessy as a lower end type tight end. Don't get me wrong, it's not nothing super crazy, but I think if he can see 6 to 8 targets on a weekly basis, you're probably going to be starting him on that lower echelon of tight ends. He's at the Los Angeles Rams, at the Tennessee Titans, Houston Texans, and then at the New York Jets. None of those secondaries really scare me that much. I know the Rams should be good, but they haven't played very well, and Tennessee's secondary is not good at all. So James O'Shaughnessy, a good streaming option down the stretch. And then Jack Doyle. Now, Jack Doyle's literally outplayed Mo Alley-Cox up to this point, especially over the last few weeks. 5+ targets in 3 straight games. 3 touchdowns in his last 5 games. 6 catches, 81 yards, and a touchdown on 7 targets yesterday. A great day. And he's at the Houston Texans, who Houston just tends to give up a lot of fantasy points. So I like Jack Doyle as a potential guy going forward. As a low-end tight end 1, obviously he's going to be better in spots. You're going to stream him in certain spots, but he's a tight end option if you're really hurting at the tight end position. So now let's get to some of my defensive streams for week number 13. First off, Minnesota. Vikings at the Detroit Lions. Yes, they lost to the San Francisco 49ers, gave up a bunch of points, but they're playing the Detroit Lions this week. Detroit hasn't scored over 20 points, I want to say, since week 1. Minnesota, 2+ sacks every game this season and 1+ turnover in 6 of their last 7 games. So I like Minnesota as a good streaming option this week. And then we got the Kansas City Chiefs. They're at home. They got the Denver Broncos coming to town. Chiefs defense really stepped it up and picked it up over the last few weeks. And Denver Broncos, if Bridgewater were to be out and Drew Lock is under center, Drew Lock just hasn't looked good when he's actually played this season. So Kansas City be a great streaming option, especially this week. And then we got the Miami Dolphins, who played very, very well over the last 4 weeks. They get an at-home matchup against New York Giants, who have just completely struggled on offense altogether. 4 straight games allowing 17 or fewer points. The Miami defense, 16 sacks in their last 4 games. The first 8 games, just 12 sacks. So they've really, really picked it up on defense. So I like Miami as a great streaming option, potentially top 5 defense this week. So that's it. That's been my waiver wire. Heading in to week number 13. We're that much closer to the fantasy playoffs, and it's time to really make that push. You got to get those last W's in and really hope for the best if you're really on that outside trying to reel your way in. So once again, like the video, subscribe, share, thumb bell for all your content all season long. I have all your sit starts, waiver wire, ask me anything. We got the matchup video. Any questions, drop them in the comments. We'll be glad to give you our opinions and our advice. And while you're there, like I mentioned, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. And for the first 4 downs, it's been B. Scott, and I'm out.